Okay guys, today we're going over graphing equations of a line in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is a form that we love. We love that form, and that is y equals, and you probably have seen this before, y equals mx plus b, where the m, which is the coefficient of x, right? That's called the coefficient of x. So the number that's being multiplied to the x is your slope. Right, so that is your slope. And your B, the B describes where the line is going to touch or cross or intersect the y-axis. So that's where it's going to touch the y-axis. So that's why they call it intercept and slope form, right? So that's the reason why this is called slope intercept form, because it identifies, when it's in this form, it tells you what the slope is, and it also tells you what the y-intercept is, where it crosses the y-axis. So we're going to use the y-intercept and the slope to actually help us graph a line really quickly. Before we do that, you have to be able to tell me what the slope is, and you have to be able to tell me what the y-intercept is of each problem correctly. And you would think that that would be super easy. These ones are pretty easy. So remember, what's being multiplied to the m, the coefficient, what's being multiplied to the m is your slope. So our slope in this problem is -3. Remember, the -3 tells you it's going downhill. So you have to make sure that your line is slanting. Remember, a negative slant, and then that's a downhill slant. And we could also write this as -3/1, because remember, slope, it's rise over run. So we have to remember that as well for our m, right? So this would be your rise, and this would be your run. And we're going to go over it in just a little bit. The y-intercept is the b. So remember, the y-intercept is the b. So in this problem, what's the y-intercept? Where is it going to hit the y-axis? Not the x-intercept, but where is it going to hit the y-axis? It's going to hit at +2 on the y-axis. So we say our y-intercept is 2. What about in problem number 2? What's the slope? Remember, the slope is what is being multiplied to the x. And notice there is no coefficient there. See how the coefficient over here was a -3, was the m? So notice the m in this problem is the number that's being multiplied to the x. Right? The number that's being multiplied to the x. And so this one, there isn't anything there. So remember, that means the coefficient is 1. So when there's nothing in front of it, that means the coefficient is 1. So therefore, the slope in this problem is 1. And notice it's a positive slope. So your line should be slanting uphill. And then the y-intercept in this problem is, what is it, you guys? What's the b in this problem? Right, the b is -4, so we know it's going to hit the y-axis at -4. What about number 3? What's the slope? Well, you might say it's 5, but it's not. So this is so this can be rewritten as y equals 1/5 x plus 1. That's the same thing, because there's like a hidden 1 right there. So that the slope is 1/5. So the slope is 1/5, and that means we're going to rise 1, and we're going to run 5. And it's a positive slope, so our line has to be slanting in the uphill direction. And where's it going to hit the y-axis? Yeah, it's going to hit the y-axis at +1. So we say it has a y-intercept. So the y-intercept is going to be here at +1. And then what about number 4? What's the slope and what's the y-intercept? Notice the slope is the coefficient of x. It's what's being multiplied to the x. So the slope is 7, and it's positive, so that means it's going to be going uphill. And we could rewrite this as 7/1, because remember, any number divided by 1 is that same thing. So these both mean 7. So when we're actually going to graph, we write it as 7/1, because that tells us we're going to rise 7. So we're going to go up or down 7. And then we're going to run, which means we're going to go left and right 1 unit. And then notice our y-intercept, remember, was the b, right? So our b was our y-intercept, but there is no y-intercept. There's nothing there. Well, if there's nothing there, doesn't that mean that we're adding nothing? We're adding nothing. So isn't our y-intercept 0? So I'm going to take that away, right? There was nothing there. So if there's nothing there, doesn't that imply there is the y-intercept is 0? So that means it's going to hit the y-axis at 0. So let's see how this works now. So here are some problems to graph. If you wanted to, you could stop the video, go get some graph paper, and you can try to graph these as we go along. So after I do one, you could try it, and then for number 2, you can try to do it before I do it. So here we go. I'm going to blow it up, and we're going to graph it. And we're going to be using Nearpod to graph because we know a lot of you don't have graph paper, so we're using Nearpod. So the first thing you want to do is you want to identify your y-intercept. Where is it going to hit the y-axis? And isn't it at the b? So remember, the slope-intercept formula is y equals mx plus b. And what's either being added or subtracted is where it's going to hit the y-axis, and we call that the y-intercept. So we're assuming you have some vocabulary from previous weeks, and this is the slope, which is the rise over the run. So we know it's going to hit the y-axis at -4. And in the Nearpod, we want you to put a red point on the y-intercept, right? So our b in this problem is -4, which is our y-intercept. So we're going to put a point. And then our slope is the coefficient of x. It's not 1/2 x. Our slope is just 1/2, no x. And that means we're going to rise 1 and we're going to run 2. And we're going to start from the y-intercept. So we're going to go up 1 and then 1, 2 and put a dot. We're going to go up 1 and then over 2 and put another point. We're going to go up 1 and over 2. So we're basically just making a bunch of slope triangles. And then we're going to go back to the y-intercept, and now we're going to go down 1 and then left 2, put a point. Down 1, left 2, and put a point. And we could go down 1 and left 2 and put a point. Normally, we would have you guys connect it so you could get the line. And normally, we wouldn't show, when we're doing this, we wouldn't really show the actual triangle part. Right? So that's normally what your graph would look like. So can you count up 1, over 2, up 1, over 2? And notice it has to be uphill. Notice my line is going uphill. So let's see what happens. So let's start over again. So here we got to go at the y-intercept is -4. If we go up 1 and left 2, and go up 1 and left 2, right, and down 1 and right 2, and down 1 and right 2, notice we get a downhill slant. So that would be, we would have to go, so we have to run in the right direction. So you have to think about which way to run according to whether you have an uphill slant or a downhill slant. So again, we start at -4 and we're going to rise and run. So our slope is 1/2. So we're going to go up or down, right? That's our rise, 1. And then we're going to go left or right, and that's our run. So we're going to go up 1, over 2, up 1, over 2, up 1, over 2, up 1, over 2. And then we can go from the y-intercept, we can go down 1, over 2, down 1, over 2, down 1, over 2. So that's what we want to see on Nearpod. We don't want you to connect it on Nearpod because when I tested it out on Nearpod and I drew my line, first of all, it's really hard to draw a straight line with Nearpod. The second thing is, the reason why we don't watch it, because when I drew a line, I couldn't see the points, and I really need to check that your rise and run, that you're counting 1 and 2 correctly. Be careful, don't go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. This slope right here, this slope is up 2 over 1. That is a slope of 2, and that's not what we were supposed to do. So you got to make sure that you're doing the correct rise and run. So it's easier for us if you don't draw the line in Nearpod. If we're using graph paper, we want you to draw the line. Okay, so that's how it kind of works. So let's try 5 more problems. So let's start with the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is +1. So we're gonna y-intercept, that's where it's gonna hit the y-axis. And then the slope is -3x. So remember, it's got to be slanting downhill. So we got to make sure our line is going downhill because of the negative. And the slope is -3, which we could write as -3/1. So we're going to rise 3 and we're going to run 1. Because isn't 3 divided by 1 the same as 3? So from the y-intercept, we're going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and left 1. Up 3, 1, 2, 3, and left 1. And then we're going to go back to the y-intercept and go down 3, right 1, down 3, right 1. So remember, your run is right and left, and your rise is up and down. And notice it's slanting downhill, right? You can see it slanting. So if I went 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1. See how it has a 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1 set of stairs? That's our slope. That tells you the steepness. That tells you how steep the line's going to be. On Nearpod, this is what your answer on Nearpod would look like. And on Nearpod, you can just tap with your finger and it'll make a nice straight circle. And please use red for the y-intercept. Normally, if it was regular graph paper, we'd like you to take a straight ruler and we'd like you to line it up. So if your points aren't lining up, you miscounted. Okay, let's do number 3. Okay, so the y-intercept is the b, and the b in this problem is -2. And that means it's going to hit the y-axis, right, at -2. So there's the y-intercept. Remember, the b part is your y-intercept. That's where it's going to hit the y-axis. So it's going to hit down here at -2. And then remember, the slope is the coefficient of x. So you could rewrite this as y equals. Remember, there's really a coefficient 1 there. So that's the same thing as writing 1/4 x minus 2. So the slope is 1/4 and it's positive. So we have to be going uphill. So that means the slope is 1/4. Therefore, we're going to rise 1, which means we're going to go up or down 1. And then we're going to run 4, which means we're going to go right or left. So from the y-intercept, we're going to go up 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, put a dot, a point. We're going to go up 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and put a point. And we can also go from the y-intercept down 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, put a point. Down 1, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, can you do it? Can you do it without actually drawing the lines? Can you count in your head? So we want you to count in your head. And we want it to look like this when you're all done. So let's try that again. And remember, it has to be a positive slope. So from the y-intercept, we're going to go up 1 unit, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, put a point, and then up 1, right 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then from the y-intercept, we're going to go down 1, and then left 1, 2, 3, 4. And then down 1, left 1, 2, 3, 4-ish. Notice how our points line up and see how the slope is not as steep. So that's what your answer would look like on Nearpod, and you wouldn't have anything there, right? And if we did connect it and draw the line, you can see it's not a very steep line, right? And it should all connect if I was using a straight ruler. Okay, so what's the B part? What part is the B part? Right, yep, the 5 is the B part. And what does the B part tell you? It tells you where it's going to cross the y-intercept. So this is your B, and that's going to tell you the y-intercept. And remember, this is the y-axis. So we know that the line is going to cross the y-axis at +5. So we want you to put a red dot on the y-intercept in the Nearpod. And then the slope, what's the slope? The slope is what's being the coefficient what's being multiplied to x. And remember, when there isn't a coefficient, that implies the coefficient is 1. So the slope in this problem is negative 1. So notice it's a negative, so remember our line has to be slanting downhill. And couldn't we write 1 as 1 over 1? So that means we're going to go up 1, we're going to rise, and we're going to run 1. And we have to go in the negative direction. So I'm going to go up 1, but I'm going to have to go to the left 1 to make it slant downhill. I'm going to go up 1, left 1, and then I'm going to go down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1. But can you do it without drawing the little triangles? So I'm going to go up 1, left 1, up 1, left 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, run, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1. So that's what your graph should look like on Nearpod. Right? Notice that it has a up, down, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and notice it's negative. Okay. So what's the y-intercept in this problem? 5? Nope. Remember, what's being multiplied to the x, the coefficient of x, remember, is the slope. So that is the slope, not the y-intercept. So remember, that's the slope. So the m is 5, and it's positive, so it has to be going uphill. And couldn't we write 5 as 5 over 1? So that's going to be our rise and our run. But there is no plus 8 or plus 6, so doesn't that mean that's really a plus 0? So isn't our b really 0 in this problem? So that means it's going to intersect at 0. And there's 0 on the y-axis. It's going to hit at 0. And now we're going to use the slope of up 5 over 1, and it has to go in an uphill slant. So we're going to go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 1. And I can't go up 5 and over 1 again because it's off my graph paper, but I can go down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 1. And that's as far as I can go because otherwise I'll be off my graph paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over 1, right? See, I'm off the graph paper. So that's fine. So that's as far as I could go on Desmos. And if we'd like you to put your y-intercept in red. Don't have to. But for this exercise, we want you to. Number 6, last one. If you had a piece of graph paper, you could make your own coordinate plane. You could try it out and see how you do. You could pause the video and check it out. So don't we want to start at the y-intercept? So the y-intercept in this problem is -4 is your b. So that's where it's going to hit the y-axis. So this is your y-intercept. That's your b. And that means it's going to hit the y-axis. Remember, this is your y-axis at down here at -4. So we want you to put a nice little circle or point on -4 because that's where it's going to hit the y-axis, and that's your b. And then your slope is the coefficient of x, and the coefficient of x is 2/3, and that's your m. So your m is 2/3, and it happens to be another positive slope. So that means our line has to be going uphill. So from the y-intercept, we're going to start at the y-intercept. We're going to go up 1, 2 blocks, and then we're going to run 1, 2, 3 blocks and put a point. Can you do it without drawing it? So do you have to actually draw it 1 up 2 blocks, and then we're going to run 1, 2, 3 blocks and put a point? And then we're going to drop 2 blocks and run left 3 blocks, put a point. Right, so let's try it again without. Can you count those in your head? So can you count those blocks in your head so that you can get your answer? So let's see. We start at the y-intercept, and we're going to rise 2, and we're going to run 1, 2, 3 blocks. We're going to rise 2 blocks, and then we're going to run 3 blocks. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to drop 2 blocks and run 3, 1, 2, 3 to the left. And that's our line. So that's what it should look like in Nearpod. And if we were able to draw the line, it's even hard for me to draw a straight line. And I have a stylus. And some of you don't have a stylus. You just have your finger. And that's why for Nearpod, we don't want you to draw the line because it'll be too messy. And then we won't be able to see your points. and then we won't be able to verify that you're rising and running correctly. Okay? So this is what your Nearpod homework assignment will look like. Tomorrow we'll do part 2 graphing, which will make it a little bit harder for you.